Hi everyone, welcome to arguably the most important part of my 18th century dressmaking series. Today it's time for the Italian gown, the actual outer dress layer, if that makes any sense. So let's recap a little bit. I've slowly been working on this whole 18th century ensemble for a while now. Unofficially, I started with my stays that I made as part of my corset series, and that was in February last year. And then coincidentally in February as well, but this year I actually started working on this whole outfit. So I first made the shift, I then made a petticoat, a false rump, a outer petticoat, and now it's time for the gown. If you've seen the other videos in the series, you know that I've been using the American Duchess Guide to 18th Century Dressmaking for most of the pieces, and if you haven't seen the other videos, I will make sure to link the playlist so you can check out the rest of this series. Anyway, for today's episode, I will again be using the American Duchess book, and the piece I will be making is the Italian gown. Now, it's made up of two main parts, I guess. We have a fitted bodice, and attached are skirts that really don't close all the way around, so the front is open so you can actually see the petticoat underneath. Now, for the fabric, I have this beautiful printed cotton. It's on a white background and it has these pink, green, purple kind of shades that make up this beautiful floral pattern, and it goes beautifully with my pink petticoat. Technically it's the other way around. The pink petticoat goes perfectly with this fabric because I bought this fabric first, and then I bought the fabric for the petticoat to match this fabric, but the important thing is that it matches. And then for the lining, I'm just using some plain white linen, and this is the linen I use for the under petticoat, I believe. Now let's get started, because I have a feeling this video is going to be pretty long, so let's not waste any time. We are going back in time to when I actually made this, because, yeah, spoiler alert, by the time I'm filming this, I'm already done making it. I'm also, by the way, in a new apartment, so the footage of me making this gown are going to be in my old apartment, and then I'm in the new apartment now. So you'll see different places throughout this video. Anyway, let's get back to past me, because the first thing I had to do was make sure I got the pattern ready. I ended up just copying the pattern from the book, just exactly those measurements, because I didn't know their measurements, if that makes sense. So I didn't really know what I had to adjust to make it work for me. So I decided to just use their measurements and see if that's something I can work with. Then once I had the paper pattern ready, I made a quick mock-up of some old sheets, and then I doubled up the fabric because the real thing is going to be 2 layers of fabric as well. You know, that's going to be the lining and then the main fabric. So for the mock-up I also used 2 layers. I then cut out the pieces with a really big seam allowance, because with the big seam allowance there's a little bit more room to take out seams and just make more adjustments as I went along. And for the fitting I didn't sew the whole mock-up together, I just pinned the seams together so that when I was wearing it I could easily move the pins while I was wearing it, so I didn't really have to take it apart fully every single time, which just made it a little bit quicker. After the first try on I did let out the side seam and the center back seam by about 1 centimeter because it was a little bit too small for me, and then I did the same for the sleeve seams. So here it is with all those adjustments done, and I think it's looking pretty good. There is some gaping in the waist area on the back, so I also adjusted that area to make it fit a bit nicer. And I realized that the waistline needed to be a little bit longer, because I found recently that I have a relatively long torso, I guess. It's been something that I've sometimes struggled with sewing patterns, but knowing that, I just made the pattern pieces a little bit longer. We're in the middle of a heat wave when I'm filming this and I am dying. Probably not helping that I'm drinking hot coffee, but okay. Anyway, once I was happy with the mock-up, I made new pattern pieces by just cutting the mock-up pieces to the right size, and I traced them on some pattern paper. Mock-up done, new pattern pieces ready. It was time to cut the pieces out of the main fabric and the lining fabric. So I started with the skirt pieces because they are just rectangles. For the measurements for the skirt pieces, the width is just the width of the fabric, and the length I measured earlier over all of the layers. So because I'm wearing the false rump in the final outfit, I needed to account for the extra length there. And then, whilst I was cutting it out, I just made pieces a little bit longer, just to be sure. You can always cut off excess fabric, but it's a little bit more tricky to make pieces longer after the fact. Then for the bodice pieces, I placed them somewhat strategically. I didn't do full pattern matching because that would have driven me insane. So I just made sure that at least the pattern was the right side up, you know, and that I kind of centered the big flowers in the middle of pattern pieces so that they wouldn't be cut off on the sides and then the middle would be empty, if that makes sense. So I really try to make all the beautiful flowers on this fabric have their own moment to shine. Then once I was done cutting, I had still so much fabric left over, so I don't know what went wrong. I bought the recommended amount of fabric, but maybe mine was a different width. I don't know, I just have a lot left over, but don't worry, I will be using that. I already have something planned. So you will see that, I believe, at the end of the summer. So stay tuned for that. Now let's go back to 18th century dressmaking. Then with all my pieces ready, it was time to start assembling. I didn't really follow the instructions. I never really do. I did plan to, but I got confused and I just decided to do, I don't know, what made sense to me. What did make sense to me was to first sew this back and the side back seams using a really strong back stitch. Also, this entire gown will be hand sewn. I first thought of sewing the invisible seams on the sewing machine and then the visible ones by hand, but I really wanted to hand sew this whole thing. I do have hypermobile fingers, so I cannot really sew for that long without getting pain. But I did start this project pretty early on, so I had a lot of time to work on this and decided I could just hand sew it if I could just pace myself. Next, I sewed the center back seam of both the lining and the main fabric. With the center back seam done, it was time for the boning channels. These are the only boning channels in the whole bodice, so it's not much, but should help with the shaping of the back. Then for the boning channels, the seam allowance of the lining was folded once, at first. I then decided I didn't like it, and I folded it twice and sewed that down. After the boning channels were done, I clipped the seams and I pressed them open, then pinned the front panels to the back and pinned the shoulder straps on, so that I could try it on and check if the fit is right. There's a lot of trying on in this video because yeah, you really need to with a fitted bodice like this. So first I tried on the lining. And then the outer layer. And for this try on session I was focusing on the side seams. And I was happy with those. So I then sewed the side seams into place using a backstitch. With the side seams done, it was time for the shoulder straps and the sleeves. First I pinned the shoulder strap lining into place, ready to be sewn. Then I prepped the sleeves by sewing the elbow dart. Then I actually followed the American Duchess instructions, believe it or not. And I used one seam to sew the lining and main fabric of the sleeves together. After sewing the seam and turning the sleeve right side out, I pressed it and prepped the sleeve cuff by folding the edges of the lining and main fabric to the inside, making sure the main fabric was slightly longer than the lining fabric. I then sewed that kind of from the inside, so that the stitches were only visible inside the sleeve and not on the outside. After that, I basted the lining and main fabric together along the edges and then pinned the sleeves to the bodice, making sure to leave out the sleeve lining. My plan was to later sew the lining over the seam allowance to hide the seam allowance into the sleeve. Now for the shoulder strap, I kind of followed the American Duchess instructions, because I left the main fabric out of this whole sleeve setting process until the end. I first pinned the sleeve head to the shoulder strap lining and folded the excess fabric at the top into like a little pleat, I guess. Then with the sleeve pinned, I tried it on again, just to check the placement. Now, unfortunately, the footage is out of focus, I'm sorry. But just know I was happy with the sleeve. I also pinned along the center front, along what would become the edge. After sewing the sleeves into place, I trimmed some of the seam allowance, clipped all the way around, and folded the sleeve lining over the seam allowance and sewed that into place. Then the final step for the sleeves was finishing the shoulder strap. And to do that, I pressed the edges of the main fabric shoulder strap pieces to the underside and pinned it into place on top of the lining and sleeve head seam allowance. And then sew that into place as invisible as possible. Now the bodice was almost done at this point. I decided to insert the boning next, so I cut some pieces of this boning. This boning comes with some fabric cover, so I removed that, and then I used a nail file to just smoothen the edges, make sure there are no sharp edges at all, because that would destroy the bodice. And then I inserted the boning into the boning joints. After that, I worked on the edges of the bodice, so I removed the basting and folded all the edges to the inside. And again, just like with the sleeve cuffs, making sure the outer layer extends slightly beyond the lining layer. Then I sewed the hem only in the place where the skirts would be attached, because then I could pin the skirts into place and try it on to check the skirt placement, and I could still make adjustments to the rest of the bodice hem if necessary. Speaking of the skirts, that's what I started working on next. First I worked on the center back seam of the skirts. So I pinned the selvages of the two panels together, checking the direction of the pen, making sure they were both going in the same direction. And then I sewed the seam just using a running back stitch and not sewing all the way to the top, because that was suggested in the book and I actually listened to that. Then I pressed the seam open, or started to, but I first burned the inside of my wrist on my iron when I was placing the seam on my ironing board. Not the first time this has happened, and I can guarantee it won't be the last. So I finished pressing the back seam, but then paused to take care of my burn. So here it is, the burn all bandaged up. It stayed bandaged up for a while after this. It has now healed. I now have a scar. There. Anyway, I was ready to work on the next step, which was finishing the front edges. For that I folded the edge under twice, pressed, and then sewed as invisible as possible. Trying to only catch 1 or 2 threads on each stitch, which was a challenge, but it's definitely worth it. Hi. So we've done a lot of pleating in all of my historical sewing, but this one takes the crown. I need to pleat, let me show you, 150 centimeters of fabric down to 28 to go in between these points on my bodice. So that's going to be interesting. I also need to make sure that the pleats on the visible side are tiny. I can obviously hide a lot of fabric in the back of the pleat, if that makes sense, but yeah, I just wanted to come in and say that this is going to be interesting. And yeah, I'm a little bit nervous, but I'm going to give it a shot. I don't think I will be doing any projects with pleating in the, I was going to say in the near future, but I do have to make accessories, and I think there's some pleating involved in that. So we are not done with the pleating, but this one is the most intense one so far. Hi, it's me again for an update. I pinned the skirts to the bodice and I'm just putting it on again for another fitting. I do have a little bit of issue with some gaping here because this is just too long. So I marked a point across the back where I can take it in and hopefully it will sit so much nicer then. You also may notice that the situation around here is different. That's because I changed my shift. Because there was a really big ruffle here and it was just way too high, so now it's much better. And yeah, looking good so far. I think I am just going to sew the skirts to the bodice now. And then I need to figure out how I'm going to do the finishing of the skirts. I need to hem it, and then I need to do some tying situation that I'm still unsure about. But so far so good. I'm feeling great. This is so exciting. I also still need to finish all of these edges here. But yeah, let's keep going. And here the skirts are sewed on. Next up, I pressed the seam allowance of the skirts down. I didn't trim them because American Duchess recommends not trimming them. Then I needed to make some adjustments to the shoulder strap because the neckline was gaping. So I carefully unpicked the stitches so that I could still use the thread to secure the remaining stitches into place, if that makes sense. I then folded the lining and pinned that into place. I then sewed the fold along the neckline edge and I refolded the main fabric, pin it back into place and stitch along the edge to kind of cover up everything again. Next, it was time to sew some tapes. I sewed on a waist tape to help the back really lie flat against my back, if that makes sense. And I sewed tapes that would hold up the skirt. Then, for the final step, the hem, I first roughly figured out the shape of the hem and pin it into place. Then to check if it's correct, I put it on a mannequin because it's way easier to look at the hem on a mannequin than on myself, and I only needed to check the hem in relation to the petticoat, so the mannequin was fine for that. And I actually was happy with it on the first try. So then I cut off the excess fabric along the hem and I folded it under twice, pressed and pinned it so that it was ready to be sewn. So for the last time this episode, I sat down with my needle and thread and sewed the hem into place. And with that, the gown is done. Now let's have a look at the final result. I am so incredibly happy with how this turned out. It's better than I thought it would be. It's not perfect. I think it's going to be almost impossible to make this perfectly on your own, if that makes sense. Like, I couldn't really fit it on myself and pin stuff into place while I was wearing it. So I did the best that I could. And I had the issue of the shoulder strap being too big. So I took that in and that's now much better. I do think there's still some wrinkling around the armhole. There is some excess fabric in the back. That's okay. I think the print definitely helps because it's kind of a busy print, so it hides all of those imperfections a little bit. But yeah, this is looking pretty nice, pretty smooth. So I'm really happy with that. These skirts are also, yeah, I just love it. It's so exciting to own this now. When am I going to wear this? I have no idea. I actually, I bought a second mannequin to be able to display both my Victorian outfit and this outfit. So it will at least be displayed, and hopefully I have some plans for wearing it. So you will see that soon. Yeah, we are almost done with the full outfit now. We still have one episode in which I'm going to make some accessories and we're going to finish this whole thing. So I need to make some neck ruffles, some sleeve cuff ruffles. I'm probably going to make a cap. I need to make a hat. Well, make a hat. I ordered a hat and I just need to decorate it. And I need to make an apron. And then we are truly done. Also, next episode, I am going to attempt to style my hair in an 18th century way, because obviously this is very, very modern and I want to go for the full look. So we're going to try 18th century hair and makeup as well. And then hopefully we will get the full picture done. Also, I got shoes, but yeah, they're like custom shoes. I think they're supposed to be bridal shoes and they were really, really cheap, but I just needed something that goes with this because all I have is black shoes that are way too modern and this is kind of vaguely historical looking. So yeah, I do have some plans. Oh, I also need to make a bow for at the top of the neckline here. So we're going to add a little pretty pink bow and then we are done. I also in the next episode just want to go through everything. So once we've made all the accessories, I'm just going to start in my shift and then we're going to put on all of the layers and we're going to just have a little look at all of them. Kind of look back at this whole project and finish this project. So yeah, I'm really, really looking forward to this. I kind of just want to walk around in this now for a little bit, just in my apartment. I am baking bread at the moment, so I don't know if this is necessarily a baking bread outfit, but I'm doing it because I just love wearing it. That's also a thing. It's very comfortable to wear. Like it's a lot of layers and stuff, but I don't know. I feel good in this, which is good. But yeah, that's enough for today. I feel like this video is already way too long, so I'm going to end this here. Thank you for watching. If you don't want to miss the next episode, the big finale episode, if you will, feel free to subscribe. Have a great day and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.